Hi, I'm excited to share with you our updated Uniform Bar Exam frequency chart. And more specifically, this is a frequency chart for the MEE, or the Multi-State Essay Examination portion of your UBE. So first, I want to acquaint you with the chart a little bit, and then I'll talk about why it's so important. So first things first, you'll recognize that on the left-hand side, we've listed all of those subjects that are fair game. So these are those subjects that you should be preparing because, again, the examiners can write a question testing any sort of topics or issues within these subjects. And then along the top of this chart, you'll notice the bar exam administrations. So for instance, all the way to the right-hand side, it says J20. That's illustrating to you what was tested on the July 2020 bar examination. And then finally, at the bottom of the chart, what you'll see is an X by itself indicates that there was one full question on that subject indicated. If you see an X in parentheses, that's indicating that it was a subject tested with another subject. And this is because the MEE can test multiple subjects on any one question. So for instance, sometimes they like to cross over torts and agency. Sometimes they like to cross over criminal procedure and evidence. Additionally, the subject of conflict of laws is a subject that is never tested on its own. If you look at the chart all the way through all of the bar exams listed here, conflicts of law is never tested as its own standalone subject. It's always tested with another subject. And usually those subjects are things like civil procedure, family law, or wills. In other words, decedents' estates. So now that we're better acquainted with this chart, the reason becoming familiar with this chart is so important is because our goal is to help you study efficiently and effectively. We know that during bar prep, you are really busy. So if we can help you streamline the process and maybe save you some time along the way, that is our goal for you. So you might be wondering, how does this chart help me study more efficiently and effectively? And I'll answer that question. This chart is helpful because while we would never advise you to ignore any subjects while prepping, we would advise you to spend more time with those more frequently tested subjects. And then when you come to reviewing those less frequently tested subjects, you can study smart. So again, you're not going to ignore any subject, but when you come to those subjects that are just not heavily tested, you're going to first focus on those topics within the subject that are heavily tested. So let's talk about the frequency in which these subjects are tested. We've kind of broken them down into tiers. So for purposes of this video, I'll talk about Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 subjects. Tier 1 subjects are those that are the most frequently tested. And those Tier 1 subjects are those like civil procedure, which is in fact the most highly tested subject on the MEE. It also consists of contracts, agency and partnership, corporations and LLCs, secured transactions, and evidence. So again, those are our Tier 1 subjects. Again, you can look at the chart and to see how frequently these are tested. I mean, take a look at Civ Pro. There's truly only a few bar exams that are missing X's here, indicating that it is very frequently tested. Our Tier 2 subjects consist of those like trusts and future interests, torts, real property, constitutional law, decedents' estates, and family law. And then finally, Tier 3, those subjects that are of course fair game, but they're just not as heavily tested, are those like criminal procedure and criminal law, as well as conflict of laws. What you'll see here on this chart is we've actually broken up criminal law and criminal procedure for you so that you can get a better feel for when those subjects were actually tested. Instead of just kind of clumping them together and leaving you a little unsure about what that means, again, we've separated it for you. So to bring this full circle, I said that the goal of becoming familiar with this chart was to help you study more efficiently and effectively. So while you're never going to ignore any one subject, we would first advise you to focus on those heavily or highly tested subjects, those Tier 1 subjects that I discussed. So again, for example, that's things like agency and partnership, corps and LLCs, civil procedure, contracts, secured transactions, evidence. And then when you start coming to these less frequently tested subjects like criminal procedure and criminal law or conflict of laws, we would advise you to study SMART. So studying SMART means first focusing on those highly tested issues within those subjects. So for example, whenever we see conflict of laws tested, as I previously mentioned, it's not a standalone subject. It's always going to be tested with another subject. And they really like to test it with subjects like decedents' estates, or wills, family law, and civil procedure. So usually when it's tested with wills, they're testing which state's law will apply to the distribution of someone's assets. When it comes to family law, the topic that they love to test is the recognition of marriage. And when it comes to civil procedure, they like to test transfer between venues and then which state law applies or which law applies. Similarly, when they test crim law, we know as a subject it's not heavily tested, but the topics within it that you should be paying attention to are those like homicide, the defense of not guilty by reason of insanity, and then theft offenses, specifically things like larceny, have been tested a few times. And when it comes to criminal procedure, again, not a relatively frequently tested subject, and more recently than not, it's been crossed over with evidence a few times, but they like to test things like Miranda and the Fourth Amendment. Usually when they cross it over with evidence, they are testing it with hearsay. So again, the purpose of going through that was just to give you some highlights about how to study efficiently and effectively so that you can focus first on those heavily tested subjects, and then you can make sure as you're progressing with your studies that you're focusing on those highly tested topics within each subject. Be sure to check out another one of our videos where we talk about those highly tested topics within each subject to better help you study, again, efficiently and effectively.